The brass compass needle scraped glass, ticking wrong against Cole Harland's frozen palm. Metal tapped his boot again, thin desperate knocks beneath the drifted cabin door. Cole dragged the door open, blizzard wind biting hard through his beard. An Apache boy clutched his coat hem, small fingers locked like iron traps. The boy shoved the compass upward, needle spinning wild, glass cracked white. "Compass found you," the child whispered, snow crusting dark hair and lashes. Behind them, the storm howled, and the needle kept ticking wrong. The compass needle scraped weak circles inside the cracked glass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole Harland turned it in his stiff fingers, the metal cold enough to sting through his calluses. The needle never found north anymore. Just wandered. Lost things behave that way in winter. The cabin held the quiet of a graveyard. One iron stove breathing slow heat. One wooden table scarred by years of knives and cups. One chair. The second chair stayed pushed against the wall where no one sat anymore. Wind shoved hard against the shutters. Snow rasped along the logs like sandpaper dragged over bone. Cole listened to it without moving. Storms talked plenty. He had learned they never said anything worth answering. The compass ticked again. Wrong rhythm. Like a tired heart forgetting its work. Cole set it on the table. The sound continued. Tick. Scrape. Tick. He poured coffee thick as tar and watched steam climb toward the rafters. Outside, the blizzard swallowed the mountain road and every mile beyond it. No riders. No wagons. No reason for anyone sane to be traveling tonight. The knock came anyway. A dull thump against the cabin door. Soft. Almost swallowed by the wind. Cole did not move at first. Storm tricks happened often. Loose branches. Rolling stones. Dead wood dragged by wind. The knock came again. Thump. Thump. Not wind. The compass needle shuddered across the glass with a dry scratching sound. Tick. 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 Faster now. Cole stared at the door. Nobody crossed these ridges during a blizzard unless they were lost. Or desperate. Or dying. He stood slowly, joints cracking like frozen timber. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. The rifle rested against the wall beside the door. He did not reach for it. Not yet. Another knock. This one weaker. The kind of sound a hand made when strength was nearly gone. Cole lifted the latch. Cold air shoved through the opening the moment the door cracked wide. Snow burst inside in a swirl of white needles. Something small collapsed against his boot. A child. Thin arms wrapped his leg with sudden iron strength. Snow crusted the boy's dark hair and lashes. His coat hung loose and stiff with ice. One shaking hand lifted toward Cole's chest. A brass compass dangled from a leather cord. Cracked glass. The same broken scrape of metal inside. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The boy looked up through wind and snow. "Compass found you," he whispered. Then the storm pushed harder, and the Apache child stepped across the threshold into Cole Harland's cabin. Wind hammered the cabin walls through the night. Snow hissed along the logs. The storm would not move on. Cole Harland fed another split log into the stove. Flames licked upward with a steady roar. Warmth pushed against the cold, pressing through the cracks of the cabin. Behind him, small boots scraped the wooden floor. The boy had not taken off the compass. It hung from the leather cord against his chest. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle dragged across the broken glass again. Cole poured hot water into a dented tin cup. Steam curled into the lamplight. Drink. The boy took the cup with both hands. His fingers trembled against the metal. He drank slowly. Not like a starving child. Like someone careful not to spill warmth. Cole watched the frost melting from the boy's hair. Snow turned to water and ran down the collar of his coat. "What's your name?" The boy looked at the floorboards. Silence. The stove popped. A knot inside the wood cracked open with a sharp snap. The boy flinched. Cole waited. Finally the child spoke. Taza. The name came soft. Barely louder than the storm outside. Cole nodded once. That compass yours? Taz lifted it slightly. The needle scraped again. Tick. Scrape. Tick. No. Where'd you get it? The boy looked toward the door. Not at the door. Beyond it. Toward the mountains buried in white. Found it. Cole did not ask more. People who crossed the Winter Mountains carried stories heavier than words. The stove breathed heat into the room. Warm air pushed against the frost on the windows. Outside, wind screamed through the timber. Inside, only the fire spoke. Taza sat near the stove. Boots almost touching the iron door. Cole noticed how close the boy stayed to the heat. Like a stray dog who had slept too many nights in snow. He slid a plate across the table. Dried venison. Hard bread. Taz looked at the food first. Then at Cole. Cole gave a small nod. The boy ate. Quick. Careful. Every bite quiet. Only the faint tearing of meat and the scratching compass breaking the silence. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole leaned back in his chair. The empty second chair remained against the wall. Untouched. Dust gathered along the legs. Taza glanced at it once. Said nothing. The wind shifted outside. Something heavy struck the cabin wall. Thud. The boy froze. Cole listened. Branches. Just branches. Storm throwing dead timber. Still. Taza's fingers tightened around the compass. Tick tick tick. Faster now. Cole noticed. You expecting someone? The boy shook his head quickly. Too quickly. Cole stood and walked to the door. The wood groaned as the wind leaned against it. He cracked the latch just enough to listen. The storm roared back. Snow drove sideways through the gap. No hoofbeats. No voices. Nothing but the mountain screaming under winter. Cole shut the door again. The latch clicked heavy. Inside the cabin the silence returned. But thinner now. Cole crossed the room and lifted another log. Set it in the stove. Flames flared bright. Warmth rolled across the floor. Taz leaned closer to the heat. His eyelids sagged. Sleep trying to claim him. Cole noticed the boy's coat. Too thin. Stiff with old snow and travel. Take it off. Taza hesitated. Then slowly slipped the coat from his shoulders. Cole draped it near the stove. Ice cracked and fell from the cloth. The sound scattered across the floor like broken glass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass never stopped. Cole crouched near the boy. You come far? Taza nodded. How far? The boy lifted a hand and pointed vaguely south. Toward the valleys hidden beyond the mountains. Cole followed the gesture with his eyes. That direction held nothing but empty country. And trouble. The stove crackled. Wind shoved harder against the roof. The cabin groaned. Taza spoke again. Quiet. They followed trails. Cole looked down at him. Who? The boy shook his head. Would not say. The compass scraped louder. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole stood slowly. Walked to the window. Frost coated the glass thick as milk. He wiped a small circle clear with his sleeve. Outside, the world was white chaos. Snow spinning under moonlight. Nothing moving. Nothing living. Still. Cole felt the old instinct stir in his chest. The one he had buried after too many winters. Trouble followed children who crossed mountains alone. Always had. He returned to the table. Pushed the second chair toward the fire. The legs scraped the floor. A sound that had not lived in this cabin for a long time. Sit there. Taz looked surprised. But obeyed. He settled into the chair slowly. like stepping into a place meant for someone else. Cole poured another cup of hot water. Set it beside the boy. Steam rose again. Warmth. Quiet. For a moment the cabin almost felt alive. Then the compass needle scraped harder. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Cole stared at it. The needle pointed toward the door. Toward the storm. And somewhere far beyond the mountains. Taza whispered into the firelight. They are still riding. Outside the wind answered with a long hollow howl. Morning came slow through the frost. Gray light pushed against the cabin window. The stove had burned down to red coals. Soft heat. Soft silence. Cole Harland woke to the sound of metal scratching. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass again. He sat up in the narrow bed and listened. The cabin held the quiet of deep snow. No wind now. The storm had moved on. Just the slow breathing of the mountain. Cole pulled on his coat and stepped into the main room. The fire gave a faint crackle as he stirred the coals. Sparks lifted. Warmth returned. Across the table, Taza sat awake. The boy had not slept long. The compass rested in both hands. His thumbs rubbed the cracked glass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole poured coffee into a cup. The smell filled the room. Bitter. Strong. Storm passed. Taza nodded. But his eyes stayed on the compass. Cole took a swallow of coffee and watched him. You listen to that thing all night? The boy shrugged slightly. It listens. Cole frowned. Listens to what? Taza lifted the compass. The needle scratched another circle. Then stopped. Pointing toward the door. For a moment the cabin felt colder. Cole stepped closer. You fix that thing, it might tell you north again. The boy shook his head. It does not look for north. Cole leaned against the table. What does it look for? Taza looked at him. Then at the door. Men. Silence fell hard inside the cabin. The stove popped. Cole looked at the compass again. The needle trembled slightly. Tick. Tick. Like something alive inside. Cole grunted. Metal doesn't smell riders. Taza said nothing. The boy slid the compass back under his shirt. The leather cord creaked softly against his coat. Cole walked to the window. Frost had thinned. Outside the world shone white under fresh sun. Snowfields stretched clean and untouched. Except for one thing. Cole narrowed his eyes. Tracks. Far down the slope. Thin dark marks cutting across the snow. Too straight for elk. Too steady for wolves. Horse tracks. Old. But not old enough. Cole wiped the glass wider with his sleeve. The tracks disappeared into timber. Headed toward the lower trail. South. The direction Taza had pointed. The stove crackled louder behind him. Cole turned. The boy watched him. Quiet. Waiting. Cole pulled on his hat. Stay here. Taza stood quickly. The chair scraped the floor. No. Cole paused. Why? The boy's fingers tightened around the compass under his coat. Tick. Scrape. They follow. Cole studied him for a long moment. Then stepped outside. Cold air bit his lungs. The snow creaked under his boots. The mountain smelled sharp and clean. Silence spread across the valley. But silence in winter meant little. Cole crouched beside the tracks. Boot prints. 2 men. Maybe 3. A day old. Maybe less. The horses had been pushed hard. Snow kicked wide behind each hoof. Cole followed the line with his eyes. South Ridge. Toward the canyon trail. He stood slowly. The wind carried a faint sound through the timber. Distant. Barely there. A raven calling somewhere over the valley. One harsh cry. Then quiet again. Cole returned to the cabin. The door creaked open. Warmth rolled out to meet him. Taza stood where he left him, hands near the compass. Cole shut the door. They were here. The boy nodded once. I told you. Cole hung his coat on the peg. Maybe they passed through. Taza shook his head slowly. They circle. Cole studied the child. Too calm. Too certain. You run from them long? The boy looked toward the stove. Flames danced against the iron door. 3 days. Alone? Yes. Cole rubbed a hand across his beard. 3 days in mountain winter should have killed the boy twice over. Yet here he stood. Small. Quiet. Watching the fire like it held answers. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass sounded louder again. Cole noticed the needle twitching. It had turned. Now pointing toward the ridge behind the cabin. Cole followed its direction with his eyes. Nothing but snow and timber out there. Still. The scratching sound continued. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Faster now. Cole felt a slow unease settle in his chest. Boy. Taz looked up. You sure that thing only points at men? The boy nodded. Cole stepped toward the door again. He listened. The mountain stayed quiet. But deep inside that quiet he felt it. Pressure. Like the air before thunder. The compass scratched harder. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Taza whispered without looking up. They are closer today. Outside the distant raven cried again. And somewhere far down the valley, snow shifted under unseen hooves. The fire burned steady that night. Logs settled with slow cracks. Warmth rolled through the cabin in soft waves. Outside, the mountain lay quiet under new snow. Too quiet. Cole Harland sat at the table sharpening his knife. Stone against steel. SHHK. 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 Across the room, Taza sat on the floor near the stove. Boots off. Thin socks steaming in the heat. The boy watched the fire like it held stories. The compass hung loose against his chest. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound had grown familiar. Like another clock living inside the cabin. Cole tested the blade edge with his thumb. Sharp enough. He set the knife down. You know horses? Taz looked up. Yes. Tomorrow we check the trap line. The boy nodded once. Cole poured thick stew into 2 tin bowls. Steam lifted slow and rich. Warm smell of salt and venison filled the air. Taza ate carefully. Still quick. But slower now. Like someone learning the food would stay. The cabin settled into quiet. Fire crackle. Spoon against tin. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole leaned back in his chair. You said men were riding. Taza wiped his mouth with his sleeve. They come from the South Valley. What do they want? The boy stared into the stew. Silence stretched. The stove popped. Finally Taza spoke. They want land. Cole snorted softly. Everybody wants land. The boy shook his head. They want a place that is hidden. Cole frowned slightly. What place? Taza lifted the compass. The needle scratched slowly. Tick. Scrape. It shows them where to look. Cole stared at the cracked glass. Looks broken to me. The boy's voice stayed quiet. It is broken. Then how does it help? It lies. The word hung between them. Cole rubbed his beard. Explain that. Taza turned the compass slowly. The needle swung wide. Then dragged hard toward the south wall. Tick. Tick. Scrape. They think it points true. Cole leaned forward. But it doesn't. The boy shook his head. It points to danger. Silence returned. Outside the wind shifted lightly through the pines. A long soft sigh through frozen branches. Cole looked toward the wall where the compass pointed. Only wood. Only snow beyond. Still. The scratching sound seemed louder tonight. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole stood and added another log to the fire. Flames climbed higher. Warmth spread again. "Who gave you that compass?" Taza hesitated. Then answered. "My father." Cole turned slowly. "Where is he now?" The boy did not answer. The fire popped hard. A burst of sparks jumped behind the stove grate. Cole watched the boy's face. No tears. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that meant the answer was buried deep. Cole nodded once. Understood. The cabin fell silent again. Fire. Wind outside. Compass scratching. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole walked to the door. Cracked it open a finger's width. Cold air slid inside. Sharp as a blade. He listened. Nothing. No hoofbeats. No man. Just the slow creak of trees shifting under snow. He shut the door. The latch dropped heavy. Behind him Taza whispered. "They will find the trail." Cole turned. "You see them?" The boy shook his head. "I hear them in the compass." Tick. Tick. Scrape. The sound quickened again. Cole crossed the room and lifted the compass gently. It felt colder than the air. The needle spun once. Then dragged toward the south again. Scrape. Cole set it down slowly. "You sure it isn't just broken metal?" Taza met his eyes. "No." The stove breathed heat. Warmth wrapped the room. But a chill lingered beneath it. Cole sat again. Picked up the sharpening stone. SHHK. 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 Steel against stone filled the silence. Taza watched him work. "Why do you stay here?" Cole did not look up. "Mountains quiet." The boy tilted his head slightly. "Not tonight." Cole paused. The stone stopped moving. The compass scratched again. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Louder. Faster. Cole slowly lifted his head. Outside the cabin something shifted in the snow. A distant sound. Faint. Almost lost in the wind. Crunch. Then another. Crunch. Hooves. Far down the valley. Taza's voice dropped to a whisper. "They ride again." The compass needle trembled hard against the glass. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. And the fire suddenly felt too small for the growing cold outside. Dawn came thin and pale across the mountains. Light crept through the frost on the window. The stove breathed a slow orange glow. Cole Harland stepped outside with his rifle across his arm. Cold air bit hard. The snow squeaked under his boots. Behind him the cabin door closed with a low wooden thud. The valley stretched wide and silent. Too silent. Cole moved down the slope toward the lower trail. The cold sharpened every sound. A crow somewhere in the timber. A branch dropping snow. His own breathing. Then he saw them. Tracks. Fresh. Horse prints cutting deep through the snow. 3 riders. Maybe 4. Heavy horses. Pushed hard. Cole crouched beside the trail. The snow around the hooves had not crusted yet. Less than an hour old. He studied the direction. Straight toward the ridge above the cabin. Toward him. Cole stood slowly. The wind carried a distant sound. Metal jingling faintly. Tack. Bridle rings. The riders were not far. He turned and walked back uphill. Not running. Just steady. Snow creaked beneath each step. Behind him the valley stayed quiet. But the silence had changed. It held weight now. Like breath held too long. The cabin came into view through the trees. Smoke rose from the chimney. Warm gray against the morning sky. Cole pushed the door open. Heat rolled over him. The stove roared alive. Taza sat at the table. The compass lay flat before him. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle spun in small tight circles. Faster than before. Cole shut the door hard. They're close. The boy did not look surprised. I know. Cole leaned the rifle beside the door. How many? 3. Cole watched the compass. The needle dragged toward the north wall. Toward the window. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Maybe 4, Cole muttered. The stove popped loudly. A log split inside the fire. Warmth filled the room but the air felt tight. Cole walked to the window and wiped the frost with his sleeve. The valley shone bright under the rising sun. Then movement. Far below. Small dark shapes against the snow. Horses. 3 of them. Riders hunched against the cold. Moving slow. Studying the ground. Tracking. Cole's jaw tightened. They found the trail. Taza stood beside him. Small shoulders stiff. The compass ticked louder. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole stepped away from the window. You stay inside. The boy shook his head. They will see me. Cole grabbed his coat and tossed it over the boy's shoulders. Then they won't see much. Outside a raven screamed. Sharp. Lonely. The riders moved closer along the valley trail. Snow sprayed behind the horses. Cole checked the rifle. The bolt slid back with a clean metallic click. Then forward again. Quiet. He leaned the weapon beside the door again. Not yet. The stove roared hotter. Cole added another log. Flames climbed high. Warmth pushed the cold toward the corners of the cabin. But the compass kept scratching. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Faster. Cole looked down at it. What happens when they reach the cabin? Taza's voice stayed low. They ask questions. And if they don't like answers? The boy met his eyes. They take. Cole looked away first. He stepped to the table and poured coffee into a cup. His hand stayed steady. Steam curled up into the air. Outside, the riders reached the base of the ridge. One of them lifted a hand. The group slowed. Scanning the slope. Cole watched through the window. They were dressed for work. Long coats. Rifles on saddles. Not lawmen. Hunters. The lead rider pointed toward the trees. Toward the trail leading up to the cabin. Cole felt the old cold settle inside his chest. The kind that had nothing to do with winter. He set the coffee cup down. The cabin floor creaked as he walked back to the door. Behind him the compass scratched wildly. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Cole picked it up. The needle spun hard against the glass. Then locked toward the door. Toward the riders climbing the ridge. He set it back on the table. Taza whispered. They smell the trail. Outside, the first horse appeared through the trees. Dark shape moving between the pines. Snow falling from branches as it passed. Then another. And another. 3 riders. Just as the boy said. They stopped 20 yards from the cabin. The horses snorted clouds of steam. Leather creaked. One man swung down slowly from the saddle. Boots hit the snow with a dull crunch. Cole stood still beside the door. Inside the cabin the fire cracked loud. Warmth. Noise. Life. Outside the world waited cold and silent. A fist struck the cabin door. Hard. 3 sharp knocks. Thud. 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 The compass needle slammed against the cracked glass. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. And the man outside called through the wood. Morning, friend. Silence filled the cabin as the fire popped behind Cole's back. The knock stayed in the wood after the sound died. 3 dull thuds. Snow slid from the roof outside. Cole Harland stood beside the door. The rifle leaned against the wall within reach. Behind him the stove roared with heat. Warmth pressed against his back. Cold pressed from the other side of the door. The compass scratched on the table. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. The man outside knocked again. Harder this time. "Morning, friend." Cole slid the latch halfway. "Not open." "Just enough." "What do you want?" The wind pushed through the crack. Sharp. Bitter. A man's voice answered. "Looking for a boy?" Cole's jaw moved once. "Lot of boys in the world." Boots shifted outside. Snow crunched. Another voice laughed softly. The first man stepped closer to the door. "You alone in there?" Cole didn't answer. Behind him the stove popped. The compass scraped louder. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The man outside exhaled. Cole could hear the steam of the horse beside him. "Name's Whitaker," the man said. "Working for Mr. Bellamy." The name meant nothing to Cole. But the tone did. Money. Confidence. Ownership. Cole leaned one shoulder against the door. "Never heard of him." Whitaker chuckled. "Most folks haven't. But they will." Snow creaked as another rider shifted his weight. Leather saddles groaned. Metal rings jingled softly. Noise in the cold air. Whitaker spoke again. "We're tracking an Apache boy through this valley." Cole's eyes moved slowly across the cabin. Taza stood behind the stove. Small. Silent. The boy's hand pressed against the compass under his shirt. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole answered the door. "Haven't seen one." Whitaker paused. The wind hissed between the logs. Then the man laughed again. "You sure about that?" Cole kept his voice flat. "I'd remember." Snow shifted outside. One of the horses stomped. Hoof striking ice. Whitaker stepped closer to the door. His voice dropped. "Trail leads right up this hill." Cole shrugged, though the man couldn't see it. "Storm does strange things to tracks." Whitaker tapped the door with one gloved knuckle. "Light. Friendly. I'd like to come in and warm up while we talk." Cole didn't move. "Cabin small. 3 men can stand." "Not in this one." Silence stretched outside. The compass scratched faster. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Whitaker sighed. "Friend, Mr. Bellamy pays good money for cooperation." Cole said nothing. Behind him the fire snapped loudly. Flames licking the iron walls of the stove. Warmth thick in the room. Whitaker spoke again. "If that boy is inside, he belongs to Bellamy now." The words hung heavy. Cole's hand rested lightly on the rifle stock. "Belongs." Whitaker answered without hesitation. "Bellamy bought the valley rights last spring. Land. Water. Anyone squatting on it." Cole's voice stayed quiet. "Children aren't cattle." Whitaker's tone hardened. "In this valley they are." Snow blew against the cabin wall. The wind returned. Low. Restless. Behind Cole the compass slammed against the glass. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Whitaker heard it. "What's that sound?" Cole did not answer. The man leaned closer to the door. "Boots grinding the snow." "I heard that," Cole said flatly. "Clock." Whitaker chuckled again. "Funny clock." Behind the stove Taza held his breath. The compass needle spun hard under his coat. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Whitaker lowered his voice. "Let's not make this difficult." Cole shifted his stance. The floorboards creaked. "What happens if I say no?" Whitaker answered calmly. "We search the place anyway." The words came simple. Clean. Like a man used to being obeyed. Another rider spoke from the snow. "Tracks don't lie, Whitaker grunted. "No. They don't." Cole lifted the rifle slowly. The bolt clicked as he worked it once. Metal sliding clean and cold. Outside the horses snorted. Leather creaked. Whitaker stopped talking. Cole's voice carried through the door. "You search this cabin and somebody bleeds." Silence. The wind sighed through the trees. A raven cried somewhere down the ridge. Whitaker finally spoke again. Still calm, but colder. "3 rifles out here. 1 in there." Cole leaned closer to the door. "That's enough." The compass slammed again. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Whitaker heard it clearly this time. "That clock sure is nervous." Cole smiled slightly. "Storm makes everything nervous." Boots shifted again outside. One rider spat into the snow. Whitaker exhaled slowly. "Well, looks like we came up empty." Cole said nothing. A long moment passed. Then Whitaker's voice rose again. Friendly once more. "Tell you what. We'll check the valley. If that boy shows himself, we'll come back." Cole answered. "You do that." Snow crunched as Whitaker stepped away. Horses shifted. Saddles creaked. The men mounted slowly. Cole stayed still beside the door, listening. Hoofs turned in the snow. The riders moved downhill. Slow. Careful. The sound faded between the trees. Crunch. 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 Inside the cabin the fire crackled. Warmth returned. But the silence felt heavy. Cole finally opened the door a crack. Cold wind slipped inside. He watched the riders disappear into the valley timber. Then he shut the door. The latch dropped solid. Behind him the compass still scratched. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Taza spoke softly. "They will come back." Cole picked up the compass. The needle spun once. Then pointed straight at the door again. He set it down slowly. "Yeah." Outside the wind carried the faint echo of distant hooves. Not leaving. Just circling the valley. The riders did not come back that day. But the valley did not return to peace. Cole Harland stood on the ridge above the cabin as the sun fell low behind the mountains. Cold air crept through the trees. The snow had hardened into a crust. Below him the valley stretched long and pale. Tracks cut through it now. More than before. Not 3 riders. 5. Maybe 6. They had circled. Exactly as Taza warned. Cole watched until the last light slid off the snow. Then he turned and walked back toward the cabin. Boots crunching. Rifle resting across his shoulder. The cabin window glowed amber in the dark. Firelight. Warm. Alive. Inside the door creaked open. Heat rolled out. Taza sat at the table. The compass lay flat before him again. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole closed the door behind him. "They brought friends." The boy nodded slowly. "They always do." Cole removed his gloves and set the rifle against the wall. The stove roared. A heavy iron sound of heat and life. Outside the wind returned. Low. Whispering through the timber. Cole poured coffee. The mug clinked against the table. "You hungry?" Taza shrugged. Cole slid a plate across the table anyway. "Dried meat. Hard bread." The boy ate slowly. Eyes drifting often toward the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole noticed the needle had shifted again. Not pointing toward the valley anymore. Now toward the east ridge. Cole frowned. "You see that?" Taza nodded. They spread out. Cole leaned closer. "You can tell that from this thing?" The boy touched the glass lightly. "It feels them." Cole almost smiled. "Metal doesn't feel." Taza said nothing. The stove cracked loudly. A log split under heat. Sparks jumped behind the iron grate. Warmth rolled across the room. But Cole felt the cold creeping closer. He stepped to the window. Wiped the frost. Darkness covered the valley now. but small lights flickered far below. Lanterns. Moving slowly through the trees. Searching. Cole watched the lights drift. They'll climb the ridge by morning. Behind him the compass scratched faster. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Taza whispered. They do not want the cabin. Cole turned. What do they want? The boy lifted the compass. The needle trembled hard. They want where this points. Cole stared at the cracked glass. And where's that? Taza looked toward the mountains. Beyond the valley. Far beyond. A place that cannot be found. Cole leaned against the table. That's a strange thing to chase. Taza's voice stayed soft. It keeps people safe. Silence fell again. Outside the wind rose, pushing snow against the walls. The cabin creaked. Cole sat slowly. You say this valley belongs to that Bellamy man? Taza nodded. He buys land. Why? He digs. Cole frowned. For gold? The boy shook his head. For water. Cole stared at him. Water. Taza pointed toward the compass again. Where it leads. The needle scratched louder. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Cole leaned closer. You saying this thing points to water? The boy nodded once. Hidden water. Cole looked back toward the window. Lights still moved in the valley. Lanterns sliding through trees like fireflies. Searching. He muttered quietly. That would make a man rich. The compass suddenly slammed against the glass. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Both of them froze. The needle swung violently. Now pointing straight at the cabin door. Cole slowly stood. Outside something shifted in the snow. Closer this time. Not in the valley. On the ridge. A faint crunch. Then another. Crunch. Cole grabbed the rifle. The bolt slid back with a sharp metallic click. Then forward. Ready. Taza stepped closer to the stove. The firelight danced across his face. The compass trembled in his hand. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Cole moved toward the door. Slow. Quiet. He cracked the latch. Cold wind rushed through the gap. The night outside lay black and silent. Then a voice spoke from the darkness. Smooth. Educated. Too calm for a mountain night. Mr. Harland. Cole froze. The voice continued. I apologize for the hour. Boots stepped forward through the snow. A tall man appeared in the lantern light. Fine coat. Clean hat. Gloves too expensive for ranch work. Behind him 3 riders waited on horseback. Lanterns swaying. The man removed his hat politely. Horace Bellamy. Cole said nothing. Bellamy smiled faintly. My men informed me you might be reluctant. Cole rested the rifle against his shoulder. What do you want? Bellamy's eyes drifted toward the cabin interior. Toward the table. Toward the faint scratching sound. Tick. Scrape. Tick. His smile widened slightly. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Inside the cabin the fire cracked loud. Warm light filled the room. But the cold night behind Bellamy felt much larger. And the compass kept scratching like a warning that refused to stop. Cold air spilled through the open doorway. Firelight behind Cole Harland. Black winter night behind Horace Bellamy. The wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere a horse snorted. Leather creaked softly. Inside the cabin the compass scratched against its cracked glass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Bellamy tilted his head slightly. That sound again. Cole rested the rifle across his forearm. Clock. Bellamy smiled. Your clock seems very interested in me. The lantern behind him swayed. Yellow light sliding across the snow. 3 riders waited farther back on the ridge. Rifles across their saddles. Watching. Bellamy stepped forward one careful pace, boot crunching the crusted snow. "I believe the boy is inside." Cole did not move. "You believe wrong." Bellamy sighed softly. "I dislike dishonesty, Mr. Harland." The wind shifted. Snow whispered along the roof. Behind Cole the stove popped loudly. Warmth pressed against his back. Bellamy spoke again. "My men tell me the child carries something valuable." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "Children aren't property." Bellamy's smile returned. "Everything is property if the law agrees." He reached into his coat. Paper rustled. Bellamy held out a folded document. "My claim to the valley." Cole did not reach for it. Bellamy continued. "Every acre, every water source, every traveler." The riders behind him shifted. One of them coughed into the cold. Bellamy's voice stayed smooth. "The Apache boy trespassed on my land." Cole's grip tightened on the rifle. "You hunt children now?" Bellamy shrugged lightly. "I hunt what men hide." The compass scratched harder inside the cabin. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Bellamy's eyes flicked toward the sound again. "There it is," Cole said quietly. "You done talking?" Bellamy looked back at him. "No." His voice dropped. "Bring me the boy." The wind pushed harder through the trees. The lantern flame jumped. Cole spoke without raising his voice. "You leave." Bellamy smiled wider. "I'm afraid that won't happen." Behind him one of the riders slid down from his horse. Boots thudding softly in the snow. The man carried a rifle. Bellamy raised one hand slightly. "Search the cabin." Cole lifted the rifle slowly. Metal clicked as the bolt shifted. The sound cut through the night. Sharp. Cold. The rider stopped walking. Bellamy did not turn around. His voice stayed calm. "You would shoot over a stranger's child." Cole's answer came quiet. "I'd shoot over a lot less." The fire cracked loudly inside the cabin. Warm light spilled past Cole's shoulders. Bellamy steadied his face. Long moment. Then he chuckled softly. "You are exactly the man my investors warned me about." Cole did not ask. Bellamy continued. "A veteran. A hermit. A man who lost his family to the winter." The words landed heavy. Cold. Cole's jaw hardened. The rider behind Bellamy shifted again. Snow crunching under his boots. Bellamy lifted his hand once more. "Take the boy." The rider stepped forward. Cole fired. The rifle roared through the quiet valley. Thunder between the trees. The rider dropped instantly. Snow burst upward around him. The echo rolled across the mountains. The horses behind Bellamy reared slightly, snorting clouds of steam. Bellamy froze. The lantern swung wildly. Cole worked the bolt again. Metal snapping forward. Another round ready. Silence crashed back down. Heavy. Dead. Bellamy slowly turned his head toward the fallen man. Blood spread dark across the snow. Steam rising in the cold. Cole spoke into the quiet. "Next one comes closer." Bellamy lifted his eyes again. The polite smile was gone. Only anger remained. "You have no idea what you've done." Cole's voice stayed calm. "Stopped you." The remaining riders lifted their rifles. Wood and steel rising into the lantern light. 3 guns now pointed toward the cabin. Cole stood alone in the doorway. Firelight behind him. Rifle steady in his hands. The wind howled louder through the pines. Bellamy's voice turned sharp. "Kill him." The second rifle fired. The bullet smashed into the cabin wall beside Cole. Wood splintered. The stove roared. Cole fired back. Another thundercrack. A horse screamed. One rider tumbled from the saddle into the snow. Chaos burst across the ridge. Horses rearing. Lantern crashing into the snow. Wind whipping sparks of firelight from the doorway. Cole stepped forward into the cold. Working the bolt again. Metal clacking fast. Another rider fired. The shot screamed past Cole's shoulder. Cole dropped to one knee. Fired again. The third rider's rifle fell from his hands. He collapsed beside the horse. Silence returned suddenly. Only the wind now. And the slow crackle of fire inside the cabin. Bellamy stood alone. Breathing hard. The lantern lay tipped in the snow. Its flame guttered weakly. Cole stood. Rifle aimed straight at Bellamy's chest. The compass inside the cabin scraped wildly. Tick. Scrape. 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 Bellamy looked from the bodies to Cole. His voice came quieter now. "You think this ends here?" Cole said nothing. Bellamy's eyes burned in the lantern light. "I have dozens of men." Cole's finger rested against the trigger. "Bring them." The wind howled again through the ridge. Bellamy slowly backed away. Boots crunching. He mounted his horse without another word. The animal stamped nervously beside the fallen riders. Bellamy turned the horse downhill. Before leaving he called back once. "This valley belongs to me." Cole lowered the rifle slightly. Behind him the compass scraped louder than ever. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. As Bellamy rode into the darkness, the wind carried the last echo of hooves down the valley. Then the mountain fell quiet again. Cole Harland stood in the snow outside the cabin. Rifle still raised. Breath fogging the cold air. Two bodies lay motionless on the ridge. A third man groaned softly somewhere near the horses. Blood steamed against the snow. Inside the cabin the fire snapped loudly. Warm light spilled through the open door. And the compass scratched like a trapped insect. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Cole lowered the rifle slowly. The cold pressed through his coat now. He stepped toward the fallen rider nearest the lantern. Boot nudging the rifle away from the man's hand. The rider was gone. Eyes open to the winter sky. Cole looked down the ridge where Bellamy had disappeared. Darkness swallowed the trail. But he knew men like that. They always returned. Cole picked up the fallen lantern. Set it upright again. The flame steadied. A small circle of warmth against the snow. Behind him the cabin door creaked. Taza stepped outside. Barely a sound. The boy's breath came in small white clouds. Cole glanced back. "You should stay in." Taza shook his head. The compass hung against his chest. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle pointed down the ridge where Bellamy had ridden. Then it swung slowly the other way. Toward the mountains. Cole noticed. Thought that thing pointed at men. Taza stepped closer to the lantern. Firelight touched his face. "It does." Cole frowned. "Then why is it turning away?" The boy lifted the compass carefully. The needle scraped in a slow arc. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Then stopped. Pointing straight toward the dark mountains behind the cabin. Cole watched it settle. "Explain that." Taz looked toward the mountains. The peaks rose black against the stars. "My father changed it." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Changed what?" "The needle." Cole waited. The boy continued. "Before he died." The wind sighed through the pines. Cole leaned the rifle against his shoulder again. "What kind of change?" Taza turned the compass over. On the back of the brass casing small lines had been scratched into the metal. Faint. But careful. A shape. Not a map. Not exactly. More like a path. Cole ran a finger across the marks. "What's this?" The boy spoke quietly. "A lie." Cole looked up. "My father said Bellamy watches every map. Every survey. So he made one that leads nowhere." The compass ticked softly in the cold. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole stared at the scratched lines again. "You saying this thing fools Bellamy?" Taza nodded. "He believes it finds water." Cole looked back toward the valley lights. Lanterns still drifting in the trees far below. Searching. "How does it fool him?" The boy pointed toward the needle. "It points toward men." Cole said nothing. Taza continued. "Bellamy sends riders everywhere it points." The idea settled slowly. Cole glanced down the ridge again. Bellamy had followed the compass. Everywhere it spun. Everywhere it scratched. Always chasing. Always searching. Never finding. Cole let out a quiet breath. "Your father turned Bellamy into a hound chasing its tail." Taza nodded once. "But it also shows the real place." Cole looked back at the mountains. "Where?" The boy lifted the compass again. The needle trembled. Tick. Scrape. Then locked firmly toward a narrow break in the peaks far above the cabin. Cole followed the line with his eyes. A canyon cut between two tall ridges. Hidden. Remote. He had ridden past it once years ago. Dry rock. Dead trees. Nothing worth stopping for. "Water's up there." Taza's voice stayed calm. "Not just water." Cole glanced back. "What then?" "Valley." Cole's brow furrowed. "A valley." The boy nodded. "Hidden. Safe." The wind blew harder along the ridge. The lantern flame flickered. Cole stared toward the canyon again. Bellamy wanted water. Water meant ranches. Towns. Money. But if the place was hidden, if only the compass revealed it, then Bellamy would never stop hunting. The compass scratched louder again. Tick. Scrape. Scrape. Cole looked down. The needle spun briefly. Then snapped back toward the valley. Toward the lantern lights. Taza whispered. "They are moving again." Cole lifted the lantern higher. Down in the trees the lights had begun climbing the ridge. More of them now. 5. Maybe 6. Bellamy had returned faster than expected. Cole blew out a slow breath. "Your father was clever." Taza nodded. "He said a lie can save many people." Cole looked at the compass once more. The scratched brass. The spinning needle. The lie Bellamy believed. Then he looked at the boy. "You know the way to that canyon?" "Yes." Cole nodded slowly. Behind them the cabin fire roared warm. But the valley below filled with moving lanterns. Searching. Hunting. Cole turned toward the stable. "Then we ride before morning." The compass ticked softly. Tick. Scrape. Tick. And this time the sound felt less like a warning. More like a promise pointing them somewhere Bellamy could never reach. Morning came slow across the mountains. Cold blue light spilled over the ridge. Cole Harland rode ahead of the boy along the narrow canyon trail. Snow cracked softly beneath the horses' hooves. Breath steamed in the quiet air. Behind them the valley lay hidden under a blanket of fog. Lanterns no longer visible. No voices. No riders. Only the slow creak of saddle leather. And the soft scratch of the compass hanging against Taza's chest. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Cole glanced back once. "You sure this canyon leads somewhere?" Taza nodded from the saddle behind him. "Yes." Cole studied the cliffs rising around them. Stone walls high. Broken pine trees clinging to the rock. Nothing about the place suggested life. Only cold. Only silence. They rode deeper. The canyon narrowed. Wind stopped reaching them. Snow lay untouched on the ground. No tracks. No animals. The quiet grew thick. Then the compass changed. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound slowed. Cole noticed. He reined his horse back slightly. "What's it doing now?" Taza looked down. The needle no longer spun. It held steady. pointing ahead. Cole rode forward again. The canyon turned sharply around a bend. Sunlight suddenly spilled across the trail. Warm. Bright. The horses stepped through the bend. And the land opened. Cole stopped breathing for a moment. A valley stretched before them. Wide. Hidden. Protected by walls of stone. Green grass pushed through melting snow. A river curved across the valley floor. Clear water flashing in the sunlight. Cottonwood trees lined the banks. Birds lifted into the morning air. The sound of wings filled the quiet. Taza rode beside him slowly. My father said this place remembers people who protect it. Cole stared across the valley. Warm light touched the grass. Steam lifted from the river. A place untouched by the winter outside. The compass ticked softly now. Tick. Tick. Cole slid from the saddle. Boots landing in soft grass instead of frozen snow. The warmth surprised him. Like stepping into another season. The boy dismounted beside him. His boots sank into the earth. Not ice. Not stone. Living ground. Cole walked toward the river. Water rushed over smooth rocks. Clear. Cold. But alive. He knelt and dipped his hand into the current. The chill ran up his arm. But it was not the dead cold of mountain snow. It was moving. Living. Behind him the horses grazed quietly. Leather creaked softly. Birdsong filled the valley. Taza approached slowly. The compass rested in his palm. The needle stayed steady now. Pointing toward the river. Tick. Tick. Cole studied it. That thing finally found north. Taza shook his head. It found home. The words settled in the air. Cole looked across the valley again. Grass. Water. Shelter from the wind. A place no rider would find without knowing the path. He could imagine cabins here. Smoke rising. Children running along the river. The thought felt strange. Warm. Cole stood and looked at the canyon entrance behind them. Empty. But the memory of Bellamy lingered like frost. Men like that did not forget. The wind shifted lightly through the cottonwoods. Leaves rustled together. Soft. Peaceful. Taza watched him carefully. He may come again. Cole nodded once. Maybe. The boy held up the compass again. Then the lie will send him away. Cole almost smiled. The needle rested calm against the glass. Tick. Tick. Not scraping anymore. Not frantic. Just steady. Like a heartbeat finally finding its rhythm. Cole walked back to the horses. He removed the saddle from one slowly. The leather thudded softly against the grass. The horse snorted and shook its mane. Cole looked toward the boy again. You know how to fish? Taza nodded. Yes. Good. Cole glanced toward the river. We'll need that. The boy smiled for the first time. Small. But real. Birds lifted from the cottonwoods again. Their wings beating gentle sounds into the warm air. Cole gathered dry branches along the riverbank. The wood snapped clean. He built a small fire ring with stones. When the flame caught it crackled softly. Not roaring like the cabin stove. Just a quiet fire breathing warmth into the morning. Taza sat nearby watching the compass. The needle moved slowly. Tick. Tick. Cole poured water into a tin pot. Set it near the flame. Steam began to rise. Warmth filled the small space between them. The mountain wind never reached this valley. Only the river's quiet rush. And the soft ticking of the compass. Cole sat down beside the fire. The grass bent beneath his weight. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The world simply breathed around them. Water. Birds. Fire. Tick. Tick. Cole finally said quietly. Looks like the compass brought us somewhere worth staying. Taza closed the compass gently. The ticking faded into silence. The river kept running, and the valley held them both in its warmth. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again, hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.